Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I'm with David Farrell. David has just published a new book, The Old Fat Guy's Guide to Smoking Meat. So welcome, David. Great to have you on the show today. And we want to just explore your new book and just talk about this. First of all, how did you get involved in publishing your own, well, what would we call it, a cookbook?
I think it's more of a guide for somebody who's never smoked before.
Okay.
It teaches you how to pick a smoker out, take care of it, and begin smoking at all the basics. That's the reason I wrote it, is because when I first started smoking, every book I read was by an expert and assumed that you knew those basics. Right. And I couldn't find them anywhere. So I felt there was a need to write a book that takes you right from the beginning steps. And that's how I got to write the book.
Okay. So viewers of Shaw TV will be familiar with you, David. You have a show. What's the name of the show again?
The show is You Can Make It.
Okay. And how did the two go together, the show and the book?
Well, I started a food blog a number of years ago just as a fun project to start putting recipes I was trying on. And it sort of grew, and I got followers from all over the world. And one day Shaw asked me if I'd be interested in maybe taking some of those recipes and showing people how to make them. It sounded like fun, and I just couldn't resist.
So you've done a number of episodes over the last couple of years?
Quite a few. I lost count, but I've been doing it for about 2 years, so I'm sure there's well over 40 or 50 episodes out there.
Okay. They're posted on YouTube as well, is it?
They're posted on YouTube and they're posted on my blog.
Okay, good. So let's just talk about your blog. What is your background? What is your interest in smoking meat, barbecuing, or I guess, I just know, I've watched your show a number of times, and there's just a variety of things that you present there.
Well, what happened was I was a cook as a young man in the Navy, and I cooked for a while in private industry and took some culinary training after the Navy. But I found it wasn't a really good way to support your wife and make a lot of money, so I left the industry. But I retired about 6 years ago, and I've always loved cooking, eating, hard to believe looking at me. So I started trying different recipes, and my wife bought me a smoker.
Right.
And that was a real opportunity to try new things and learn a whole new skill set. But as I was doing it, I had friends who said, well, I've never been able to do that. And instead of telling them all one at a time, I just started a blog and posting. Here's how you do this, here's how you do that. So that got me into the blogging and the communicating my skills to other people. But as I became an expert in smoking, I started getting a lot more questions on the basics of smoking. So the book kind of came out of the blog and the kind of questions I was getting.
Right, so it was sort of a natural progression then. And what has the reaction been to your book?
I've been really pleased. People have told me that it's been the first time they've actually used their smokers if they already had one, because the instructions they got from other master chefs are great, but you wouldn't want to start reading a book on Matisse if you wanted to learn painting. You'd want to go from somebody who's a little more basic. Same thing with smoking. Nobody actually told them just how to make a good pulled pork as opposed to a championship pulled pork. And I even had one wife said, it's great, my husband started cooking, and it's bad, now I've got to clean up. So I'm quite pleased with the responses.
Okay, good. So I'm not an expert in any stretch of the imagination when it comes to smoking meat, but to me it seems like it's a pretty specialized application. Is that something that maybe scares people off, or is your book designed to really help them appreciate that it's easier than it looks?
Well, two things turn people off smoking. One is they think it takes a long time, and the second is that it's very complicated. It does take a long time, but it's not complicated. It's called low and slow cooking. But take, for example, pulled pork can be as easy as rubbing some spices on the surface of some pork, putting it into a smoker, and letting it go for 11 to 14 hours, which time you don't have to do anything, and then taking it off. So it's easy, but it does go for a long time.
Right. So do you feel like you've tapped into a trend? I've heard of smoking meat a whole lot more than I have in the past.
It's an interesting statistic that came out. They did a study, and it turns out that the sales of gas grills and charcoal grills are actually reducing over the last 4 to 5 years, while the sales of smokers are going up, and the sales of pellet smokers are even going up more than other smokers. So it's definitely one of the fastest growing methods and hobbies of cooking out there.
So you tapped into a growing trend.
I hope so.
Yeah. So just thinking about your book for a moment, do you have any particular tips or suggestions that sort of stand out?
Certainly. If you're going to start smoking, the first tip I would give you is to learn that smoking is different from other forms of cooking in one major way. If you're cooking your roasted beef, you cook it for so long per pound by time. Mm-hmm. Smoking is mostly about cooking things to a temperature.
Right.
If you cook by time, it just won't work out. So it's very important that you learn to cook the meat to the temperature in the recipe. If you do that, it's easy.
I see. Okay. I know we have a lot of hunters and gatherers of wild meat in the area. What suggestion would you have for them?
Oh, definitely you want to get into smoking. There's nothing in the world better than venison pepperoni, mm-hmm. which you can do in your smoker. I find an elk roast done in the smoker is truly a sublime experience. And game jerky goes way better out of your smoker than it just does in your oven. It really helps you use, store, and share your kill much more efficiently than many other methods.
Interesting. So I can imagine people are using that quite regularly then to so maybe supplement just putting the meat in the deep freeze, right?
Well, I actually have friends who just plain don't want to smoke, and I have a deal with them on the cuts they want to get rid of. They give it to me, I turn it into summer sausage or pepperoni, and we split it.
Right.
But a lot of them now are starting to learn from me, and I'm not getting as much as I used to because they're doing it for themselves.
Right. Okay, so just talking about the book and the reaction you already referred to, you know, a lot of people are appreciating and enjoying what you've written. You've mentioned to me that you've even had a worldwide response.
Yes, much to my surprise. I've sold 10 copies in Italy and 15 copies in Great Britain and 4 copies in South Africa. And it's the miracle of social media. You get it out there and people read about it from all over the world. And I'm kind of like the thought that people are learning this method of cooking around the world because it is a wonderful way to cook.
Right. So just talk to me about getting into sort of the art of smoking meat. Is it an expensive proposition for people?
It can be, or it can be quite inexpensive. You can make a very inexpensive home smoker for under $200, but you have to do a lot of work because it doesn't have the bells and whistles. You can buy a little electric smoker for about $600 and it'll do most of the work for you. Or you can go to a full competition one to go out and enter contests with that'll cost you $15,000 or $16,000. For the beginning smoker, I'd recommend either an inexpensive charcoal smoker like a Weber Smoky Mountain or a electric smoker. Little cabinet ones are very good for doing all of the normal smoking dishes. And then if you like it, then move up into the more expensive pellet smokers, or they call the ceramic smokers, big egg-shaped things that are more expensive but easier to hold a temperature on. Spend that money after you make sure you like it and you're comfortable learning the basics of smoking.
Right. So your book is a how-to guide, but you also referred to the fact that there are some recipes in there. Where did you come up with the recipes? How many recipes, and are they easy to use, I guess is the question.
Well, I deliberately set the book up to teach you the 4 basic smoked dishes: pulled pork, brisket, chicken, and ribs.
Okay.
So there's a section just on those, and they start off with 2 recipes for each, a very, very simple basic one and one that's a little more advanced. The little more advanced one has some additions that I put in to make them a little fancier. And then I go on to have a total of about 50 recipes that cover things from appetizers like chicken wings or ABTs, which are stuffed peppers, to salmon, to different chicken dishes, just to let you spread out once you've learned those 4 basics. But if you go through that first chapter and learn those 4 basic dishes, you've learned all the skills you need to smoke everything else.
I see. Okay, and the recipes, let's just talk about those for a moment.
Certainly. I would think that anybody who learned all 50 of these recipes would be considered a pitmaster, because it covers all of the fancier dishes like rib tips, which are ribs cooked for a long time in a sauce so they're dry and chewy. It teaches you dishes that will impress your friends. And everything from, instead of just the basic ribs, to Memphis ribs, which are a dry rib, which we're not used to in North America, but are very common amongst competitors. How to cook a ham in your smoker for your next Easter dinner. How to cook a whole turkey for Thanksgiving. It'll let you do all the stuff that a normal home smoker would want to be able to do, and a few little fancy things in there too.
Okay, sounds very interesting. Let's talk about the process of putting the book together and getting it published and so forth. How did that all take place?
I would describe it as getting a root canal from a proctologist. It's very, very difficult. The writing of the book was the easy thing to do. I knew the recipes. I just wrote as if I was speaking to the people I was going to teach how to do the different things. But once I got the book on paper, I found out that I'm very bad at grammar and punctuation, but the publisher you go through will help you with that. I found out B, it's very difficult to get a publisher. I eventually went to a mostly self-published method, which I'm glad I did on several levels. But the amount of detail for layout, for setup, especially for a cookbook, because I wanted a lot of pictures, because beginners want to see what you're doing,
Right.
was very time-consuming, very complex. All the pictures are mine, and that's scary just in itself. So it was about 2 years of work from the time I first started writing it till I just got a hold of a publisher, and then about another year after that to actually get the book out. I was surprised at how difficult it was.
Right. So that is something that people find quite often, is that it's quite a process, as you mentioned, to get from concept to finished product. I congratulate you because the book presents itself well, and you've got an array of photos in there. And like you said, that really is an aid to those that want to learn the art of smoking meat.
I would say that if you just had to read it, you would find it a lot more difficult. Yes.
Right. So David, this is your first book.
Yes, it is.
Let's talk about the future. I know you're continuing with your show, so it appeared. Just give us a little bit of an overview of the show that you do again.
Okay, the show is on how to cook a whole array of dishes, mostly simpler ones, but some more complex things. I go from everything about how to make a cherry cobbler, which is quite simple, to how to make your own corned beef at home. So the show is to get you to spread your wings and try different things in the kitchen.
Right.
And my second book, which is what my future is I'm writing, this is the Old Fat Guy's Beginner's Guide to Smoking for Beginners.
Right.
I'm writing volume 2, which is the Old Fat Guy's Guide to Smoking Meat for Pitmasters.
Okay, so you've used that expression a couple times. Tell me what a pitmaster is.
A pitmaster is the one that everybody else looks at and goes, I wish I could cook like him.
Okay.
And there's different levels of it. I'm considered a pitmaster with the people I deal with online because I have a high level of skill. But there's another level of competitors. It's the difference between Wayne Gretzky and a really good local hockey player. I'm the really good local hockey player. So a pitmaster is just a good smoker.
Right. So the new book will be targeted at that audience?
That's right. It's people already know all the basics.
Yeah.
But it's going to go into more complex things like how to make your own homemade bacon.
Okay.
How to smoke cheese at home, how to make cured sausages, advanced recipes with meat stuffing, different forms of butchery, and just higher level skills that your average home cook doesn't do and maybe would like to learn just to give it a try.
Do you have a timeline for the new book?
According to my wife, longer than I took for this one because she wants to see me once in a while. I'm about 3/4 of the way finished writing it. I think I'll have it finished by the end of the year and about another year to publish it.
Okay. Well, congratulations. So David, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. So the book is The Old Fat Guy's Guide to Smoking Meat for Beginners.
Yes.
So congratulations. It was a good read. And I have to say my son-in-law, who's a smoking enthusiast, read through the book and gave it a thumbs up. So
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
It was good. So thank you, David. We appreciate you being our guest. So this has been Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host, and I'm with Lori Luczka. Lori, you've written a new book. It's called Lost, 7 Hours to Live. So it's a story of Paul Kerr, and some may be familiar with his story. It's a pretty amazing story. Can you just tell us a little bit about Paul's story?
The story took place back in June 2015. He was going over the Grey Creek Pass on his motorcycle.
Okay.
And on his return, on the outskirts of Kimberley, something happened and went wrong.
I see. Okay, so I think people are familiar with the Grey Creek Pass and the road. That's pretty rugged country.
It is.
Just tell us what happened when Paul went off the road.
He was unaware of what happened within those 3 days,
Yeah.
that he was missing.
Right.
He veered off the highway, and that evening his parents began to worry as to where he was. He hadn't come home yet.
Right.
And he had been lost in some regard. And the search crews started searching. They did up and down the Grey Creek. They had the family out looking as best they could. And as the time wore on, there was still no sign of him, and nothing to show that what had happened. It was almost like he vanished.
Right. Well, you know, the St. Mary's Valley and the Grey Creek Road, they're pretty massive country out there, so I can imagine why it would be difficult for someone to find him. Obviously, Paul did get found. You said it was 3 days?
Yes, when he was found, the doctors had stated that he had maybe 7 hours to live.
Okay.
He was pinned underneath his motorcycle. He was fading in and out of consciousness that whole time, so not aware of the situation, not aware of what was going on, what time of day it was.
Right. Fascinating story. So I'm wondering what inspired you, what is your connection to the story, and what inspired you to, document it?
I had heard on Facebook of the story of the missing and search for him, and I had reached out to him sent him a message on Facebook saying, I'm not sure if you remember me, we grew up together, not sure if you remember me, but I'm thinking of you and my prayers are with you. And from that point on, we communicated with one another.
Right.
He didn't know what occurred within those 3 days.
Right.
He didn't know the situation that took place.
Right.
And so many people had told him, you should write a book, you should write a book.
Right.
So when the time came, after months, I said to him, I would be honored to write this for you.
Right.
And so that just was the door that opened.
Right.
And doing the research on it was phenomenal. His sister helped me get in contact with the search and rescue teams. Then after he was found, his physio, that type of information.
Oh, there's a lot of recovery and
Yes,
so forth.
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting connection to the story. So you really do write it from a personal perspective then, having known Paul earlier in your life. What was the process like? How long did it take you to write the book?
Took me 3.5 years.
Okay.
I was working full-time in Saskatchewan, of course, 2 provinces away. It makes it a little more difficult, but I loved doing the research. I loved hearing the stories. There's stories within stories, and it was something that inspired me, and I became very passionate about writing it.
Right.
And when I saw Paul and how far that I thought he had come, and with his recovery, with the PTSD, dealing with the tragedy, that it was overwhelming.
Right.
It needed to be told.
So the title of the book is Lost, as I mentioned. I have a feeling that there's a couple of different levels of meaning to that word when it comes to the
Absolutely.
book. Can you just
Absolutely.
maybe explain that a little bit?
Lost physically, in the sense he was lost.
Right.
They couldn't find him for 3 days. But after talking with him for months, he felt lost. He didn't know what had happened. He didn't understand the process of the hunt. So I think it had more meaning to it. And the front cover of the book is actually the spot where he was missing. He went up the year after and took a picture, and the sun was streaming down just at that point. And I said to him, you realize that's the cover of our book.
Right.
Because this is where you were found, and this is the inspiration.
So it sounds like a pretty hands-on experience for you as well. You not only wrote the book, You took some of the photographs, or you took the cover photograph, it sounds like, and you worked with the publishing house to publish it, so it's self-published. How was that experience?
Good. They were very understanding in a lot of ways, gave helpful hints, tried to take you step by step through the process of doing so. It's not every day and anybody that publishes, that goes through the complete process of publishing something. That they helped me through a number of issues.
Right. Now I notice the book is both in hardcover and softcover. Any rationale or any reason why that is? Or?
Just to allow for both.
Right.
The hardcover is presented a lot, has a lot nicer look to it.
Okay.
But it's an easy read.
Right.
It's a short story, easy read, but it gets to the point.
Sure. So let's just talk for a moment about why this is an important story.
I think it's important really for Paul. The whole purpose and reason why I wrote it was to help him.
Right.
Help him understand what took place in those 3 days.
Right.
And help him to realize that, yes, you've come through a tragedy, but you're still standing today. And you're a lot stronger because of it, and you're a fighter. And it's an amazing, amazing thing.
So it's a short story with a big message, is that correct? Yeah, good. So let's just talk about the actual publishing experience. You went to Friesen Press, you said, and they helped you put the book together, obviously published it and printed it and so forth. The marketing is up to you, and I understand the book is available at some of the local bookstores. How's that process gone?
Really well, actually. I've had 2 book signings, one being in Kimberley and one being in Creston. That has gone very well. And I had spoken with Indigo here in Cranbrook, and they are willing to do a book signing as well. So I think getting it out there, getting the story out there, and a lot of people are aware of the stories that were in the newspaper. This happened 4 years ago. And I remember that. I remember that it's, oh great, now there is a book that's published about it. So.
Right, good. Well, good for you. It's a big undertaking, and as you said, you were working on it for 2-3 years. Is that the first book that you've written?
Yes, first book, and who knows if I'm going to write again.
So you're stealing my next question. I was going to ask, is there another book to be written?
There could be. We'll see what happens.
Right.
But at this point in time, I did what I set out to do.
Right.
I set out to help Paul to understand what took place, and that he has to be so proud of what he's accomplished.
Sure. So the book's been out, what, 2-3 months?
April. It was published in April.
Okay, so almost 6 months. What's the reaction been?
Really well. People have been so good that have read it. They're inspiring. A lot of people had stated that know Paul. They are amazed as to what he feasibly went through and is still going through to this day. And, I've had a number of people tell me they cried.
Right.
And it's not intentional to make them cry, but to get emotional about it. Obviously I did something right if I'm touching people in some way.
Well, it's good to make that emotional connection. So Lori, thank you for being our guest today. So again, the book is Lost, 7 Hours to Live. It's the Paul Kerr story. Paul's a resident of Kimberley, is that correct?
He now lives in Creston as well.
Creston, okay. Well, that's tremendous. I look forward to hearing more about your future projects as well. Thank you for being a guest on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Keith Powell, and this has been Talking Kootenay Books.